you can't work effectively on intensive restoration over this kind of a scale. This is over 3,700 square miles of basin. So what we're advocating as a way to simplify the problem of how to plan restoration is look at it in chunks. Look at it in logical hydrologic units. Look at reaches like Rock Creek, Flint Creek, Reach B, Little Blackfoot, Reach A, Lower Reach A, Headwaters, Warm Springs Creek, Silverboat Creek. These are just suggestions about ways to look at it, but they're suggestions that are based kind of on a hydrologic and maybe to a lesser extent, but somewhat of an ecological reality. And it makes sense that in any watershed restoration project, you want to make sure that you understand and are working on problems at the upstream end before you run downstream and try to solve all those problems which are still being affected by the problems up here. So working from upstream to downstream makes sense to us. The other thing, these two areas are the areas that were most affected by the historical metals toxicity damage, both from discharging to the streams and air, the impacts from the contaminated air from the smelters. So that makes sense to us. And so we would advocate, at least for our own organization, we want to concentrate in these areas for the next 10 years. We think there's huge amounts of work to do in these areas. And the mix of partners in each area may be a little bit different. Up here, you're talking about an area with a big metropolitan area like Butte. Down here, this is really an agricultural area. And we've got Deer Lodge and some very small communities. But the big impacts down here, after you deal with remediation, are related to agriculture and agricultural water use. The big impacts up here are different. There are all the impacts that you guys deal with day to day on all the Superfund sites and contamination. You've got two major urban areas up here. But you've also got, in this area, Warm Springs Creek's probably the best native fish stream left in the whole Clark Fork, above Rock Creek. You've got bull trout, you've got lots of cutthroat, you've got a big system up there. It's a diverse system, it's got all kinds of opportunity. And when you talk about restoring populations of native fish, you've got to look at where are the native fish going to come from if they're not abundant or they're not present in some of these systems. Well, right now, in Silverboat Creek, from what I understand, you guys correct me if this isn't what's happening, but as the main stem of Silverboat Creek is getting improved, cutthroat trout, for example, are coming out of German Gulch, and they're trying to find new habitat. So they're exploring into new habitat they could never explore before because it was too contaminated. The same thing as we move the restoration program down out of Silverboat Creek into the main stem of the Clark Fork, removing those barriers, there's going to be more opportunities for fish to move in and out, and Warm Springs Creek could be a key source of both cutthroat trout and bull trout to repopulate parts of the system. Frankly, this is the only area that's confirmed to have bull trout left in this whole red area. There's a couple of other populations of bull trout, one here, there's quite a few in Rock Creek. There's very few other bull trout pulled up at Clark. So that's what you've got to do in restoration. You've got to do what they call work from strength. Strength means existing populations that are good. If you're thinking about bull trout or cutthroat trout, you've got a limited number of good populations to work from. So we'd like to see work go on in those areas intensively. And then the other thing is planning. We think it's really important to get the scale thing right in planning. And I mentioned this before a little bit, so I won't go into it, but there's some really big picture planning that has already gone on and that needs to continue to go on for multiple organizations. NRD has done a huge project with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks to look at fish populations over the whole upper Clark Fork, gathered all kinds of new data that's helping out. You know, the Forest Service, if you look at this area, all this green is Forest Service. It's actually almost all Pintler Ranger District and some Butte Ranger District, but mostly Pintler Ranger District, and it's all Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest. Well, they got a new forest plan. Well, their new forest plan has a whole restoration focus, and in terms of fisheries restoration, they already know what watersheds they want to work in. They call them fish key watersheds. So they've already done planning over this whole scale about what areas need fisheries to be a priority in all future projects. And so those kinds of big picture planning efforts need to be taken into account as we move forward. And then the sub-basin scale is like what I was talking about, like headwaters and Deer Lodge Valley. We're starting, and I'm going to show you a little bit of a beginning of an example. We're starting along the process of trying to do planning at this scale for the Deer Lodge Valley, from Garrison up to Warm Springs Ponds. What would that look like? We don't have, like I said, a plan in place. We have ideas about how it should look. But we think that we need to work closely with the agencies to make sure that we're all on the same page about what are we trying to accomplish at the scale of the array of tributaries in the Deer Lodge Valley. And we have a meeting coming up with fisheries biologists, Trout Unlimited, and people like that at the end of this month to make sure we're all thinking along the same lines. What are we trying to accomplish? Are we sure we're working, in line with each other? And then at the tributary scale, that's where we need to get down to detail. Okay, what fish passage barriers need to be resolved? Where is the dewatered section? What are the water rights that apply to that section? But I really make a strong emphasis when I talk about this stuff. I've been doing watershed-related stuff for a lot of years. This is where we need to really focus on the detail. And if we get into too much detail and we try to be too ambitious in our scope and plan in detail at the whole basin level, I guarantee we'll get lost. It's too big. It's too much to say, we're going to put a detailed restoration plan together that will tell you everything that needs to be done in this whole basin. My attitude is it can't be done. People might want to do it. I don't think it can be done. But if you break things down in a hierarchical way and get into more and more detail as you go down, I think things can fall out that people can agree on much more easily. So these are our emphasis areas for the Deer Lodge Valley area in particular. And that's what I'm going to focus on for a minute, because as I said, that's where WRC and the Clark Fork Coalition have been gathering a lot of data. This is one of our technicians in the field last year. We're inventorying irrigation structures, we're walking the streams, we're doing assessments of riparian health along dozens and dozens of miles of streams. We're identifying project opportunities in there, and we're putting that information together with some of our partners to try to figure out what are the priorities. Well, we know on a big picture scale, lots of streams need to be rewatered, streams need to be reconnected, habitat needs to be reconnected, and habitat needs to be restored. Rewatering. Here's an example. Racetrack Creek, one of the biggest creeks in the Deer Lodge Valley, feeds thousands and thousands of acres of irrigation. And it's big enough in June and early July, most years you can kayak Racetrack Creek. It's a big creek. In the upper end, this is what it looks like after all the irrigation diversions get done with it and it gets down near the interstate. This is about a mile above the interstate. Last year, one of our best water years ever. I just heard that this year has got even more water. Flint Creek Range had huge water this year, and parts of Racetrack Creek are going dry this week. This creek has huge potential. It used to be a bull trout stream. Fisheries biologists haven't seen a bull trout in it since the 1980s. Locals say they've seen bull trout in it. Still, could be. There's a lot of water and a lot of habitat in the stream. It's about 20-mile long stream. It's a big stream. But even that stream gets dewatered. Reconnect. This is Cottonwood Creek flowing downstream of the town of Deer Lodge and joining up with the Clark Fork River. I'm standing right here on the bank of the Clark Fork River, which is flowing right here, 50 feet downstream of the structure. But Cottonwood Creek is not connecting to Clark Fork River. That's one of the biggest irrigation canals in the valley. Goes right through here, takes all the water out and downstream. All the fish go downstream to the water. So this is a big problem. In June, that structure is being overtopped, and there is some ability for fish to migrate upstream. But then when the juvenile fish come back down, if they come later than high water, they're running into this. So these are problems that exist by the dozens and dozens and dozens. Restoration of habitat. These are Powell County High School students working with us on Dry Cottonwood Creek Ranch. Very degraded riparian area in Dry Cottonwood, lower Dry Cottonwood. It's been pounded by concentrated wintering groups of cattle for 140 years, 130 years. But we have done a riparian fencing project with help from Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks and our neighbors. We got 4 of our neighbors involved in riparian fencing. In 2 years, we're seeing willows coming back naturally in this system. And we've also got these students in here helping us plant in certain areas. This is our deer fencing. The fencing costs more than the plants, the plant, and everything else. As you can imagine, you guys have seen that on Silver Creek too. So restoration is key. So if we were to work on 8 tributaries in the Deer Lodge Valley that we think have great potential for restoration, reconnecting them to the Clark Fork, improving habitat in the private land section only, we're not talking about on the forest, removing fish passage barriers in some of the key streams that have that kind of potential for fish, trout spawning and stuff. What is it going to cost? Well, we've got a $15 to $21 million estimate, very rough at this early stage. As I said, this is not a detailed plan. This is big picture, broad brush planning. But these numbers all come from extensive field work in the last 2 years, so we've got a pretty good idea of what's out there on the ground and what needs to be done. It needs to be refined, and we don't have landowners on board yet to do all these projects, but we know the projects are there and that they need to be done if we're going to get back to a good quality habitat, connected streams, and re-watered streams. Some of the most expensive parts of the project actually don't benefit tributaries, but actually benefit the main stem of the Clark Fork itself. As you look at the Clark Fork, again, like Silverbow Creek, metals contamination problem. Get rid of that problem. All our problems are solved? No. Then we've got the temperature problem, low flow, nutrients. All of those problems can be benefited by getting more water back in the Clark Fork. So this is the largest diversion in the Deer Lodge Valley. We are already working with the Bureau of Reclamation to do a preliminary design for this West Side Ditch project, which is a very expensive project, but could also put 20 CFS of water back in the Clark Fork River all summer long. That's a lot of water. 20 CFS is, you guys know what 20 CFS is, right? Something like that, 800 miners inches, that's what the farm guys say. It's enough water that, you know, you'll be up to your knees in fast flowing water in the canal. Well, the canal itself is, we take 40% of the water out of the canal. The canal itself is 10 feet wide. It's a big canal. So, that's another part of it. Racetrack Creek, we've already got a proposal into NRD to restore some water in Racetrack Creek through acquisition of lake water rights. That project is in process. We've got another project with the same landowner purchasing water rights with funds that we get from Bonneville Power, bringing funds in from out of state. That's already fast-tracked, so there are lots of projects that need to be done. But that's the scale that we're talking about just for the Deer Lodge Valley. Now, when we come up to Warm Springs Creek, which isn't on here, if you look at this, Dempsey Creek, Racetrack, Modesty, Lost, Perkins Drive, Peterson, Cottonwood, those are all streams downstream of Warm Springs Creek. Warm Springs Creek has huge needs and huge potential. So you need to do this kind of an exercise for Warm Springs Creek to figure out what are the priorities there, how much would it cost, what are we looking at. And then Silverbow Creek itself, of course, has a much more sophisticated restoration plan going on. But what's going on with the tributaries of Silverbow Creek? What about Browns Gulch? What about Blacktail? What about German Gulch? Well, I know Trout Unlimited out of Butte has done a lot of work in German Gulch. The Mountain High Conservation District has a very large-scale assessment for the needs for fisheries restoration in Blacktail. And Ted and I Ted's the director of WRC back there in the corner, and he and I are working with Mile High Conservation District and their contractor right now doing an assessment of fisheries needs related to sediment problems on Browns Gulch, which are multiple problems at a large scale, but on a system, again, that has some really interesting potential. Browns Gulch is the biggest tributary to Silverbow Creek. And everybody thought it was, you know, very contaminated, problematic, deep water, has a few brook trout in it. Well, the cutthroat trout coming out of German Gulch into Silverbow Creek are already going up Browns Gulch. They've already tracked them going up Browns Gulch and trying to colonize that habitat. So there's all kinds of problems up there that we're working on with Mahi Conservation District, fish passage issues. Trout Unlimited may be doing some irrigation diversions this fall on Browns Gulch to try to improve fish passage up there. So lots of opportunities. So this is an idea for one area, but we need to do similar things in other parts of the basin, in headwaters, Silver Bow, and Warm Springs Creek Basin. So what does restoration really look like as far as we're concerned? What are we aiming for? We're interested in clean water. And we know the tributaries can help contribute more clean water to the whole system. It's out there. Water is out there. If we can do the deals to get more water in stream, it's going to help everything from metals to nutrients to temperature and overall improve the aspect and ecological health of the Clark Fork River and its connections. We want to make sure agriculture stays healthy. We are very, very interested in helping agriculture invest, like we're doing with the irrigation project I told you about that we looked at, just looking at today. Help agriculture invest so that there are people farming and ranching on the land in the Deer Lodge Valley for the next generation. That's not as, the people that are involved in agriculture don't even assume that's going to happen. That's not a given. That's going to be something that requires investment. We'd love to see fisheries in Clark Fork come back to something in the next 20 years that approximates what some of our neighbor watersheds have in terms of maybe something approximating the Bitterroot, something approximating the Blackfoot. I think the NRD program's restoration plan even starts to lay out some goals like that when they talk about the Clark Fork River restoration. We'd love to see native fish repopulate some of the areas that they're not in now that they used to be in. And most important, we want to see the next generation have a greater understanding of and appreciation of what they've got in their backyard in terms of a river and stream resource. There's a lot of areas on the Clark Fork and its tributaries which are private land, which are not easily accessible. We went to Deer Lodge to the high school and grabbed all these kids, and we thought we were grabbing a bunch of ranch kids out of the high school, and we asked these 45 kids to raise their hand how many of them grew up on ranches, and 3 kids raised their hands. The other kids don't really know that much about agriculture. They don't know that much about what's going on the land out there. Some of them do have a little more hunting and fishing exposure than others, but we want to make sure these kids understand what's going on, what restoration is, and what they can do. Last year we worked with a few of these kids with Matt Vincent from CF Web. He came down to Deer Lodge and worked with these high school kids with the Clark Fork Coalition and brought them out to the Clark Fork Coalition Ranch. And then Matt extended to Powell County the program they did last year here in Butte, which was to take several kids that are highly motivated and give them an intensive program on restoration techniques so that they could try and get jobs in the restoration economy. And I think that's a great project where we're starting to connect people up to what matters. Some of the groups that we've been working with I've mentioned, but just so you have them up here, Watershed Restoration Coalition. Again, Ted's here from the coalition. He's key, and the landowners that serve on that board are absolutely key to getting anything done in that basin because they are from the agricultural community themselves. Landowners, we've had fantastic experiences so far with landowners. Trout Unlimited, Montana FWP, these guys work harder than anybody I've ever seen, and all these other organizations and more have been helping us out. So that's all I've got. Thanks a lot for your time. I really hope that you guys can contribute some of your ideas and we can incorporate some of your thinking about what's going on, especially up here in the upper part of the basin where we're not as familiar with the situation in Silver Bow Creek watershed, and give us some orientation ideas about things that need to be done up here, and if there's any way that we can contribute and help out as well. So thank you very much.